Hello, my name's Jo, this is Joey Sewy, and I am here finally with a video about what I have been sewing. This is my sewing from March and April. Thank you very much for watching, and I have two little things to say just before we get started. The first is I have a second channel called Jo Cook Yoga. Jo Cook is my name and yoga is what I do on the channel. One of my other jobs in real life is a yoga teacher, and I'm really trying to boost the subscribers on that channel up to 1,000 so that I can access the live stream function, because normally I teach in real life. And it would really help me with my time and stuff. I mentioned this in my last video about why I was struggling to sew, and lots of you have helped, and I think I've already gone over either 500 or 600, which is fantastic, so much help. But if you can just go over there and subscribe, I'll put the link down, you'll really help me out. You don't even have to have the notifications on, it's just so that I can get those subscribers over 1,000. That's when you're allowed to live stream, and that will make my life a lot easier. So thank you if you're able to do that. The second, I'll leave till later. The second thing I will leave till later. So let's get on with the sewing, and we're going to go straight into it. I have 3 tops and a couple of side projects to show you, and the first top I'm wearing. So I'm going to step back. Here it is. So this is, I'm going to take my phone out of my pocket. This is the Astoria sweatshirt by Seamwork patterns. Seamwork are a download only company. They bring out patterns, 2 patterns every month, and you have to subscribe, although you can buy them separately. And this is a pattern that has been around for a very long time, and I've made it before, but none of them have successfully stayed in my wardrobe, because when I first started making it, I wasn't all that into the cropped length of the sweater. Now I kind of, either I've grown into it or I understand better how to wear it, so I quite like the cropped length. And these are high-waisted trousers. These are the Jenny trousers from Closet Kate's patterns. They're not a new make, but they are a high-waisted trouser that I have, so it does help. And I've got a crossover of a good 2 inches, so I don't feel like I'm going to gape out of my clothes, which matters to me. So I have used some, it's kind of bonded sweatshirting. So on the reverse, it's actually green and white, and it's got a really thin layer of foam in between the grey on the outside and the green and white on the inside, which makes it kind of bouncy. It was very easy to sew with, but it wasn't very easy to choose what to make with it. But I think this works. It doesn't have a massive amount of stretch. It kind of has give for movement, but not a lot of stretch. So you need to size up with the Astoria to do that, because the Astoria is made for quite a neat fit, and it does need quite a stretchy fabric. So I did size up to make sure I could actually get this on. And then you'll also be able to see that I have done contrast neckband, not cuffs actually, but I've also done contrast bottom band. So those are the obvious construction detail. The elephant in the room, hopefully not actual elephant, is the detail here. So the construction detail here is kind of a fringe, sort of a fluffy thing. You can see how it's quite prominent, and it's basically made with wool. So if I can find it in there, somewhere in the depths here, you might be able to see a stitching line. There you can see a stitching line. And then on the reverse, you can just see some ribbon. So what I did was I wrapped some wool around a card, the length that you want the fringe to be. I then carefully snipped up the card, laid on both sides, laid that down onto some ribbon, and then carefully fed it through my sewing machine. I think I have a little bit of footage of that, so I will insert it to show you the technique I used. You could or if you could go to a shop, you can buy fringing online or in a real life shop. But I didn't want to spend the money, because I'm always very tight with my money, but also I had grey wool and I wanted to see if I could make some, so I did. In terms of the placement, I just played with it basically. I have a really small bust, so I took the judgment that I could take extra bulk. I decided not to do it symmetrical because I wasn't sure that that was going to look right. So I've very deliberately done it just on one side, up onto the shoulder. I reckon it could probably take going over the shoulder as well, but I didn't choose to do that. But I think you could, and you could even just do, I may do this sometime in the future, just do fringing on the shoulders. I've seen that, so just on the arm seam. I've seen that on the high street. I attached this after I'd made the garment. So I made the garment, I put it on, and it looked like this. Insert picture. And then I ummed and ahed for a little bit about whether I wanted to keep it really plain and arguably a bit more kind of wearable every day, or make it something a little bit more interesting. And in the end, I went for interesting, because I have quite a lot of plain, and this isn't exactly all that out there. You could go wild with this. You could do all sorts of different colours if that's your style, couldn't you? You could do pink and orange and yellow, and it would look so Mexican and fiesta, and that would be awesome if that's your style. Really go for it. But I was in all the greys, so I've got all the greys. So there you go. That is my Astoria sweater from Seamwork, with a little bit of hacking with some self-made fringing. I'll be back with my next make. So this is make number 2. It is a shirt, and this is the shirt that I was cutting out on a live stream back in March or February. I will link. It is an amazing fabric. Got it a long time ago, so I can't tell you where, I'm sorry. Well, I can tell you where. It was in the Shuttle Shipley, which is a real life store that has no online presence. But yeah, it was an end of line thing, and so you won't be able to find it there. But what was amazing about the fabric was that it was white shirting, but down the centre, although weirdly ever so slightly off centre, I don't know why, it had this big blue ombre stripe. So that back panel is the full width of the stripe, and it had sat in my stash for a really long time because I didn't know how to make the best of it, or I was scared to cut into it because I only had one shot at making the best of it. You know how it goes with fabric sometimes. But I had a shirt in mind for a long time because it is shirting. So, you know, if it's shirting, maybe the clue's in the name. Don't try and push it too much. On a side note, I reckon if I was on the sewing bee, that would be definitely the mistake I'd make over and over again. Trying to use the wrong fabric for the wrong pattern. I think that would be my weakness. I was noticing that was a couple of people's weakness on the sewing bee when I was watching last week. Anyway, I'm not on the sewing bee, sadly. So it has all sorts of detail where I've used the blue, either shown or not shown. So I'll go through that. Before I go through the detail, I will just show you the shirt in its glory. So it is a basic white shirt in most respects. It's the Granville shirt from Sewaholic. Sewaholic make patterns for pear shapes. So I'm a pear shape, narrow waist, wider hips proportionally, but it fits, and uniquely for a shirt, I certainly couldn't get this from the shops. It's got a nice fit around the waist, and all the buttons do up right to the bottom. It's got a 3-panel back, so it's got seams here and here. There will be line drawings, which also helps with the fit and helps with the curve going in. It's got 1 section sleeves with some thread stuck on them. Most shirts do, they don't normally have 2 section sleeves. It has a placket, which I have picked out in blue, so it's got a proper cuff placket, cuffs, buttons. There's quite, well, this has been an odyssey sewing this shirt. I'll tell you about it in a minute. Buttons all down the front, bust darts, and a 2-part collar, so a collar stand and a collar. The bits I have picked out in blue are, you've seen some of them already, but I'll go through them in turn. I have picked out the cuff placket. I've picked out the inside of the cuffs, so that if you turn your cuffs up, you will see it like that. Although actually I realised after I'd done that, if you roll your cuffs up, you won't. But anyway, I know it's there, and you kind of get a little flash of it. I have done some on the outside of the collar, so you can see that there is some of that blue on the outside of the collar, but there is much more blue on the underside of the collar. So again, the collar stand does some of it, but I've got the underside of the collar pretty much pure blue, and I think that looks rather marvellous. I'm very pleased with that. And so you can wear it with the collar slightly up and you've got the blue showing. And then the real obvious one that I used was all on the back panel. There you go. So I've made this shirt before. I didn't make any amendments to the fit from that time. I think from memory, the very first time I made it, which is years ago now, I probably shortened it slightly because I'm a little bit smaller than the models assume. But I think that's about it. I may have had to grade it ever so slightly extra out to the hips, but as I say, not much, because these patterns are graded for that curve. If you don't have that curve, then you can you could still cut, but you're going to have to grade in rather than grading out, which is what it's assumed to do. So it's not that you won't be able to make this shirt, but you can do that. I have also, as a note, if you're interested, I have made the shirt without the 3-panelled back. It makes it slightly looser because the 3-panelled back basically has some dart type shaping hidden in there, so the seams are not straight, they're slightly curved. So you can either choose to put some darts in, but then there's not really a lot of difference between that and doing the 3 panels, or you can simply choose to have the back of the shirt slightly fuller, and that's what I've done when I've omitted the 3 panels and not had those extra seams. So you can do that, which makes life a little bit simpler and also gives you different style lines to play with. So there's that. I made this so hard for myself. Basically, some of it I did on purpose and some of it I did by accident. It was all about the sleeves, and for some reason I've got a real blind spot for sleeves. I just often get them inside out the wrong way around, and especially when they've got plackets. Because the way that plackets should work, now one of my plackets is right and one of them is wrong. And I'm trying to work out which it is right. My right arm, which you will see is my left, is correct. How it should work is when I stand like this, the sleeve, the thick part of the sleeve pocket should smooth around to the back. It does that on this side. It doesn't do it on this side. It smooths around to the front. You're only really going to notice that if you're really picky and you're the kind of person that notices these things, or if you've got very big cuffs on your shirt, then you will notice it. How that happened was I basically attached the placket on this one, which is incorrect. I attached it the wrong way round, but by the time I came to attaching it, I was caught into doing that because of using the blue, and I had somehow not cut 2 reverse versions of it. I'd cut 2 identical versions and not mirror images, and because this blue is not the same blue on the reverse of the fabric, I couldn't turn it over, so I was stuck into doing that. Okay, sneak preview of the next make, but don't look at that, look at this. So I like to make my shirts with French seams on the inside. If you have a look at the back, there are French seams there, and the sleeve head, there are French seams there on the sleeve head. It's not as tricky to do as you might imagine. You basically have to make sure you've got enough seam allowance and then sew wrong sides together first with a very narrow seam, turn it inside out. It's easier. So the way I do it, you can do that if you do, most shirts tell you to assemble the sleeve first, so basically make a tube and then put it into your shirt. I don't like doing it that way because I find it much harder, regardless of whether I'm doing French seams or not, I find it much harder to gather the sleeve head, which is this bit, if I'm working with a tube shape than if I'm working with it flat. So I prefer to attach the sleeve to the flat. So basically sew front and back together. You've got your back and your front pieces, and then you can lay that out flat on a table, can't you? And then the sleeve is still that open arch shape and it's not closed into a tube. That is when I then sew the open arch shape of the sleeve head before I've closed the tube up. And then the next and nearly the last stage, depending on when you put your collar on, then you sew the side seam and the underarm seam all in one. So here on my inside out shirt, you can see that the side seam all the way along there and then all the way down is done in one. And it does also mean that the bulk here, I find that easier to deal with if you are doing it the way around I've just described. So you basically, it's what's called, in simple language, inserting the sleeves flat, which basically does what it says on the tin. Now, I have spent a lot of my life on the phone recently, as a lot of us have, keeping in touch with people and also working on the phone. And during some of those conversations where it's possible, I decided I would do some hand sewing, and I decided it would be a great idea. I still think it is a great idea, but it was difficult to hand sew the seams in, the sleeves in. So I hand sewed a very tiny margin and then pressed it between phone calls, and then hand sewed a very tiny line to do the other side of the French seam. And I did that on both sleeves, at which point I realised I'd put one of them in backwards and inside out. So literally hours and hours and hours of hand stitching, and I had to undo all of it to redo the seams because I'd got the sleeves on the wrong arms, and one of them I'd even got inside out. I'm not quite sure how I managed it, but I did. So what I'm showing you here is not hand sewing, although my hand sewing was very neat and it was really strong, so it would have been absolutely fine. And one day I want to try and make a whole garment just without a machine. Maybe I'll cheat for the buttonholes. But it wasn't going to be this day. I tried, but it didn't work out. Now, I am not sure this is actually finished. Here it is back on a hanger. And as I say, I'm not sure this is actually finished because it comes with pocket options. And I think I do want to put one or maybe even both pockets on. But I want to embroider them, or I want to maybe put them on slightly wonky. So I'm still playing around with those ideas. I've got a Pinterest board full of shirt pocket ideas. I don't have any of the blue fabric left, not a scrap, so I can't do anything with the blue, but I could use blue embroidery thread and do some, I'm thinking of maybe doing some sashiko embroidery on the pocket and then afterwards putting it on there. So I'm still thinking about whether this is finished or not. It's finished, it's wearable, you've seen it on, but do I want to add some pocket detail? And I think that I do. Next, here we are. This is not sewn, this is knitted, and the ones of you who watch quite often, you will go, that's very familiar. It is, because I've made it before, but I haven't made it in blue and pink before. This is the Seascape sweater by a designer, I can't remember again, but I will put a link to it down below. I love it, I love it. It is blue and pink, and it is 4 different pinks. Ombre pink from the light all the way up to the dark, or you could argue from the dark all the way down to the light. I bought the wool from John Arbon Textiles, it's called. I met them at Woolfest last year, and they sell basically, you know, painting by numbers. They sell a range of wool that they call wool by numbers or something along those lines, using that idea. And it is a range where the colours graduate really gently, which means you can do all sorts of exciting things with colour work. So I was really attracted by that, and I spent hours online thinking, do I trust the colours or not? I don't know, but I went for it in the end, and I really love what I got. The blue was an old sweater that I pulled apart because I wasn't wearing it, didn't fit properly. I'd originally bought the blue wool from Ripples Crafts, who are a Northumberland tiny, I think it's just a husband and wife, and they spin and dye their own yarn. And so they're based in the north of England, and it's kind of got quite a, you can see it's not a solid blue. And I'm pretty sure this is called Stormy Seas or Stormy Skies, which I'm a sucker for a name. So this blue is the background, and then that is the pink. It is knitted in the round from the top all the way down. When I made this in the green, I'll put a picture up if you haven't seen it, I got really bored doing the sleeves. So this time I did the sleeves really early on, just to try and stop myself losing the will to live, because the way you're supposed to knit it is you knit to about there and then just put the sleeves on holders and then knit to the bottom, and then you do the sleeves. So the sleeves are the last thing you do, and I'm not very fast at knitting the sleeves and I just got so bored. So this time I switched it around and it did help. I did the sleeves first and it really helped. So if I come back here, you can see it's really similar to the Astoria, which is now in the other room, but it's a cropped length. And to be honest, it's a little bit shorter than I thought it was going to be. For some stupid reason, I didn't try it on partway through. I just assumed it would be the same as the green one, and it wasn't slightly, or I counted the number of patterns. I don't know what happened, but it wasn't as long as I expected when I put it on. And this is the first day that I've worn it, but actually I'm liking it. I think the cropped length works really well, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to go with it. If I don't like it, because you knit from the top to the bottom, I only have to undo the bottom ribbing and then I can re-sew another pattern repeat in the colours, which I do have some left of, and all will be well. There's the detail of the ribbing. This is meant to look like whales' tails, and I think it really does. I love it. So that's how the ribbing looks, and even the colour work is meant to look like whales' tails, which I think it does as well. So we're going to move on to two side projects which are not garments but are sewing. The first, I'll move my shirt, is that I actually finished my curtains, and that was another hand sewing odyssey. And basically they'd sat there with the ends far too long for about 4 months and again, on a telephone job I could just sit. I didn't take the curtains down, but I actually sat on the floor next to the curtains and hand sewed the ends, which is about 20 meters of, no, it's about 15 meters of hand sewing, so it took quite a long time. And lastly, I have got some embroidery to show you, because I said in my last video I'm struggling to feel all that motivated to make garments, and it's true. So I was kind of casting around for things I could do that, watch that last video if you want a whole video about what I was feeling about sewing garments, because it's not been top of my mind at the moment, partly because I've been really tired. So this, I was looking around for other things I could do, and embroidery came to mind, and knitting has been something I've done, and I've got another project that's quite far on with my knitting, but this is some embroidery. Now I did not start this month. I started this back, hold on to your hats, in 2017. I know exactly when I started it because I have a picture of myself poolside in Las Vegas working on this project. It's not the most complicated project in the world. I basically put it away when we came back from holiday and I didn't pick it back up again. So it's not meant for anything in particular other than looking pretty, but I completed the last two trees, this one and this one, that are the further distant ones. So the thick one is supposed to be in the foreground and then the other ones are further behind. And I have some silver birch themed wallpaper in my bathroom and I'm going to hang that. So I will show you that, if I remember, next month when I've actually hung it. So that was another thing, and I've got another embroidery project on the go, which if you follow me on Instagram, you will see that because I have posted pictures of that. And that is all my sewing for 2 whole months. So it's been pretty slow, although not nothing. I hope you're enjoying your sewing, and I would like to remind you that if you are able to support my channel, I would absolutely love it. I grin every time someone supports me on Ko-fi. So you can go to www.ko-fi, which is ko-fi.com/Joey I'll be down there, and you can make a small donation to support my channel to say thank you for the content. If you're able to afford it, don't worry if it's something that you don't want to do or you simply can't do. I don't mind. Those of you who can afford it, you really make my day, but I'm here for every single one of you. That's why my content's on YouTube and not behind some paywall or other, but I do really appreciate those of you who can help me out. Thank you very much for watching. That's the most important part of all the things that you can do, and I'm always glad that you're there. See you next time. Happy sewing!